You're welcome. After spending 10 days in detention, Nigerian journalist Daniel Ojukwu has been released. He's a free man, but how free is the Nigerian press? Is a question to be asked. Ojukwu, a journalist with the Foundation for Investigative Journalism, went missing on the 1st of May 2024. It was discovered by his family and his colleagues that his phones were switched off and his whereabouts couldn't be ascertained. A private investigator was enlisted, and according to his employers, the FIJ, it was discovered that their reporter was abducted by the men of the Intelligence Response Team, the IRT of Nigeria's Inspector General Police, had been transferred to the Nigerian capital, Abuja, where he was detained for 10 days, allegedly for violating the country's Cybercrime Act. Right. The days of cybersecurity levy, this is maybe one of what the money will go to. But his arrest followed his report, a report that he authored about alleged financial mismanagement to the tune of more than 147 million Nigerian naira, involving a senior government official. This is according to his employer, the FIJ. Now, in March, the Nigerian police declared investigative journalist and founder and editor-in-chief of FIJ, Fisayo Sowore, wanted over alleged cybercrime. And there we see that word again, cybercrime. We'll talk about this some more later. Now, this followed intensive grilling of Buki Shonibare, who is the chairman of the FIJ's Board of Trustees, by the Nigeria Police Force Center for Cybercrime, or National Cybercrime Center, which is the NPF-NCCC, the same month at the Abuja office, only letting Shonibare go after making her promise to produce Fisayo. Now, the FIJ, you must be informed, has over the past 3 months released details upon details of what it calls an undercover investigation it conducted on the smuggling of goods into Nigeria, unveiling how this smuggling is aided by customs officials who take bribes from smugglers. Let's go back to Daniel. Daniel Ojukwu's abduction comes weeks after Segun Olatunji, editor with First News, a publication in Nigeria, spent 14 days in military detention after being abducted from his Lagos home in the middle of the night on March 15, 2024 by military men. And he was taken also to Abuja, where he was held incommunicado. Yesterday, a coalition of civil society and media groups organized a protest demanding Ojukwu's release. And before yesterday, of course, a lot of them have been speaking in the media about his plight. Today, he is a free man. But just how free, we ask again, is the press in Nigeria? And what does this episode say about the stance of the President Bola Tinubu administration on freedom of the press and freedom of speech? Omoleye Sowore is a journalist and politician. He joins us via video link from Ondo State. Lanre Arogundade is the director of the International Press Center and former chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Lagos State Chapter. Mr. Arogundade, good evening to you. Good to have you on the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
And of course, good evening to you, Omoleye Sowore, if you're with us.
Bring him in as well.
All right. Mr. Arogundade, is it a dark period for journalism in Nigeria?
Well, from the facts on ground, some of which you have reeled out, it's definitely a dark period. In your introduction about the abduction, because it wasn't an arrest, of David Ojukwu and Segun Olatunji before then, in particular that of David Ojukwu, what you didn't say, David Ojukwu, what you didn't say was that he was actually arrested on May 1st, a workers' day, and which means that journalists as workers are endangered, and then 2 days before the World Press Freedom Day. And it was, people were really wondering, is this supposed to be a cynical incident? Is this a cynical way of telling us in Nigeria that you can go and say whatever you like on World Press Freedom Day, but we do what we like? You introduced me as a former chairman of Nigerian Union of Journalists, Lagos State. That also reminds me of the fact that these were the kind of things we were dealing with when I was chairman of the NUJ, because we're under the military. So the kind of trend we are seeing was the kind of threat that was used to be associated with the military, particularly the case of Segun Olatunji, before that of David Ojukwu, who was blindfolded, who was chained, who was manacled, and these were the things that used to happen in the DMI then, the Directorate of Military Intelligence in Apapa under Colonel Omeka. So for us, it's quite worrisome. It's not what should be happening. And for civil society, media organizations, the question is not really whether anybody does not have any rights to have complaints about any story, but that you cannot, either as a government official or as an institution, now just essentially resort to lawlessness. Just decide that, okay, I would pursue the case the way I like. And we do not think it augurs well for democracy, for the military and the police to constantly feature in all this. Those institutions under democracy should be able to tell whoever is aggrieved to say, well, there's a process, there's a rule of law. We're in a democracy. You could go to court, you can report. Well, let me stop there.
So you're saying that you were NUJ chairman in Lagos State when the military, Nigeria was under military dictatorship.
Yes, exactly.
And what's happening now is reminding you of what happened then.
Exactly.
Omoleye, Sowore, you joining us from Ondo State, but you have also still been, very vocal, just like Lanre has been also as well, calling for Daniel's release. What's responsible for the recent rise in abduction of journalists in Nigeria? It's been on for some years now.
Well, let me say good evening to Lanre Arogundade, a senior comrade, colleague of ours, and an inspiration for what we did in the university. Most people don't know that he was also NANS president when NANS was NANS.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
When NANS was NANS.
Not now that, yes, not now that.
So he's a comrade.
Do what he did. Big one. What you should understand is that the desperation you are saying is that there has always been interest in controlling the press by those in government. But the media landscape has changed completely. There are now citizen reporters, the social media outlets are sometimes even sources of breaking news, investigative reporting. So you can no longer go to somebody's printing press and seize all their print before they get out. Now they have no control over the internet. And this is a continuation of what even Buhari tried to do when he was in power, which was not only arresting people, but they also tried to stop Twitter, and Twitter had become a major source of news reporting across Nigeria and distribution of news all over the world. So what they're doing this time is that they become so desperate, and they needed to show to the people that they're no longer playing. In 2021, when Buhari was in power, I was also arrested by a businessman, so-called billionaire Daniel Ojukwu, and I was arrested in front of the Court of Appeal and charged with cybercrime. But what is interesting is that the Cybercrime Act of 2015, for which Mr. Daniel was abducted by the Tinubu regime or the police, is no longer in existence. That section 24 has been amended, and it no longer includes reporting, criminal acts related to, what's it called? Related to reporting of, that annoys people. So what they're doing is they're going, extrajudicially to teach journalists a lesson that this is going to be bloody if you keep doing what you do, and if you don't like it, we're not going to resort to civil litigations. We're going to resort to strong arm tactics. And like our honorable comrade, the senior comrade said, this is the military era. We have been reminded. What is so sad is that President, Bola Tinubu, is one of the biggest media owners in Nigeria. He owns several TV stations ahead, lots of radio stations, and he owns the prominent The Nation newspaper. You imagine, how would a publisher of a newspaper of his own genre of level engage in this very disgraceful conduct of trying to muzzle the press? Considering that Nigeria would never have had democracy if we didn't have a guerrilla-style media in this country, and Lanre Arogundade was also part of that. The news was there, and people like Bayo Nanuga were doing even worse things against the military. I'm talking about one of President Tinubu's spokesperson. But so what you're saying now is that they are just, in their own little way, trying to use scare tactics, and they're saying that they will hurt people if it's necessary. If they don't stop reporting on corruption and exposing the powerful and the well-connected in society.
All right. But Mr. Arogundade, is the media space, and indeed the civic space, do you perceive that it's shrinking under the Bola Tinubu administration?
So it's something we've been talking about for some time, that the civic space is shrinking. And when you talk of civic space, you are looking at the extent to which citizens are free to express themselves, and not just journalists, individuals, particularly on the social media, which Sowore has been alluding to, that has given people a lot of freedom to express themselves, even though there are also some problems associated with the social media. And we've had threats too from individuals in government about social media regulation and all the rest of it. And the point to stress really is that it's just do not add up. We do not expect that we'll be at this stage, because we're talking of just a year of this administration, and suddenly we're talking about, all these things are happening, all these things are happening. Now, we have been able to isolate the institutions responsible for these incidents. We're talking of the police, and we're talking of the military. And in both instances, the recent ones, it's like there were individuals who were not happy about what was published in the media. So it then means that we can then call on the president as a publisher, which is mistressed and so on, to say that, look, if roles were to be reversed, if you were not in power, and these kind of things are happening, definitely you will be part of either, maybe not personally, but it's conglomerate or spokespersons or whatever, will be part of agitations to say that these kind of things should stop. So it might be a funny assumption, but because so far we have not really had a direct statement from the presidency on these matters, and we're using this opportunity to challenge them, to say that this is really, really beyond expectation. This is embarrassing, because before long, you are going to be having all these international ratings and the rest of them, and people will come around and say, it's about bad news from Nigeria. These are the kind of things that we do not want to see. Okay. So the civic space, the media space, press freedom space is actually a retreat, and something has to be done. Our own duty is to call attention to this, to condemn it once it happens, but those who have responsibility for the safety of journalists under relevant laws, under international charters, to which Nigeria is a signatory, African Charter on People's and Human Rights, imposes responsibilities on our government to protect journalists. So this is something that they need to take seriously. Otherwise, questions will continue to be asked as to why things are like this.
Omoleye, the cases we've referenced, Daniel Ojukwu's situation, we look at Fisayo Soyombo's declaration, or he was declared wanted, or they asked Shoni Barry to produce him. We look at Olatunji's own ordeal. Now, all these are linked to senior officials in the federal government. Should the president, Bola Tinubu, be held responsible for these abductions and these seeming acts of persecution of the media, or should these individuals in the president's administration, should they be the ones that this is down to?
Well, where does the buck stop? It is on the table of the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So, and those who are responsible for these abductions are people who are very close to him. The chief of staff was allegedly involved in the abduction of Olatunji, who, by the way, has resigned from his job because his employer was also forced to apologize to the chief of staff, to the president, Gbajabiamila. The person who was responsible for the abduction of Daniel Ojukwu was one of his closest aides and allies in Lagos. That's Odelope. She was former SSA on SDG to the Buhari regime. The IG of police is seen as one of his boys. And we are aware that the IG got personally involved with Daniel Ojukwu because they couldn't find Fisayo at this time. And the IG was miffed or very upset with a story done by FIG in Nigeria that the IG was close to a smuggler from the southwestern part of Nigeria, a notorious smuggler. He took this personal. So because I was in the offices of the police to get him freed, and they kept tossing us around. Eventually, we found out what was happening, And when we met with the DIG yesterday before his release, he made it clear that only the IG can order his release. So these are his people. So he has to be held responsible for it. We can't hold officials responsible when they're appointees of the president. The president is the one who appointed them. So if they are misbehaving, it's the person who appointed them that should be held responsible for their their crimes against these journalists. So he cannot escape it. And the fact remains that there's nothing they can do about it, and this is very important. And I should also add that it's not just enough to be wringing our hands here. The civil society groups in the country, journalist groups in the country should also come together and fight this. And one of the things they should fight is the Cybercrime Act of 2015, whether it's amended or not, is a very broad tool for violating rights of journalists and non-journalists. Apart from journalists, they're also going after bloggers, they're going after people who are just freely using social media. There's a guy called Ijele who's been in detention now for 47, almost 52 days, simply because he wrote on Facebook that one pastor or a GO, a general overseer of a church in the southeastern part of Nigeria, was performing fake miracles. The police goes there every 2 weeks to obtain a detention order against this fellow from different magistrates. What's abuse of magisterial responsibility? But they know what they are doing. They connive. And we saw that also with the Cybercrime Center of Nigeria Police, where they were very hostile. You could tell that they're in on it. We met with them, and they kept saying, "Oh, there's nothing that can be done." They asked us to go and bring shorties, that will make it sound as if the guy committed murder.
It's quite sad because you have a plethora of offenses in the Cybercrime Act. I'm looking at it, and we hardly hear of these other ones. Things like reporting of cyber threats, cyber terrorism, theft of your identity, electronic signature, theft of electronic devices, with fraud. These are things that. But now we're seeing that what you post online, that's where the target is.
Yeah, because the intention of this Cybercrime Act was actually to deal with cyber fraud. Maybe because of the rise of 419, Yahoo Boys phenomenon, and so on and so forth. And what we have seen increasingly is that it has become convenient to use it. And just to say that it's not as if we've really been wringing our hands. We've been on this matter, we've called for review, we've been to National Assembly. The problem is that the way the legislature works in Nigeria is that we normally identify our National Assembly by numbers. The first, the second, the third, the ninth, and so on and so forth. So no matter how far you've gone with a particular assembly, once something does not come to a conclusion, then you are more or less start all over again. So there has been, petitions, there have been meetings, there have been proposed amendments to the Cybercrime Act. But more importantly, we've repeatedly said it should not be used to harass journalists. And it's not just today. We were part of the campaign for Jones Abiri then, the same thing, Agbaja Lingo. Because it's not just Cybercrime Act, there is also the Anti-Terrorism Act, which occasionally is also used to harass journalists or to terrorize journalists. Because in the case of Jones Abiri, they picked him up, but that law empowers them to keep you for about 3 months and then they can renew and all those kind of things. So there is a case for the reform, of our laws, really, because they have become, a threat. I normally say that the the Cybercrime Act is just like a sword of Damocles on the part of journalists, because somebody publishes something, because that is the real issue. The fact that a journalist reports a story and you have disagreement with that story does not mean that that journalist has become a cyber bully. And clearly, we do not defend unprofessional or unethical conduct. That has not been our practice. But the point we keep stressing is that, in a democracy, there are procedures, there are things you can do. You can't just take laws into your own hand. And it's even bad because in the last two cases, really, nobody knew where these journalists were. It was just a question of just disappearing. And that is also another trend that is very, very, very worrisome. So for me, I feel that where individuals are alleged to have been responsible for this, one of the things we demand is that there should be diligent a prosecution or investigation where necessary to find a solution to that. It is also not just a battle, I must say, for journalists or civil society, because even the society itself, you have so many civil societies that have all kinds of agenda in Nigeria. That in itself is a problem. But this is also a matter even for the labor movement. Like I said, we journalists are workers. The NUJ, Nigerian Union of Journalists, is part of Nigerian Labour Congress. It's a matter for the larger society because everybody needs media. We need credible media. The government still communicates with citizens through the media. They come on television channels to talk about what they are doing. So when you threaten the media, you are invariably also threatening the citizens. You are denying the citizens the right to know, because different segments of society have interest in different media. There are those who listen to this station, your news central. So if something happens, you are suddenly picked up or this place is shut down, then you are denying those people the right of access to that particular station. So these are fundamental issues, and we've said it in different ways. We take different actions, and I think that the rest of the Nigerian society should also be as enriched as journalists, as media bodies, when this kind of things happen.
Thank you. Omoleye, I want to ask you, how important is, because Lanre Arogundade has told us about the process of advocating that this bill be looked at. He talked about the Cybercrime Act and also the Anti-Terrorism Act. And while he was talking, it reminded me of the particular military decree I'm trying to remember that was used against journalists.
Decree 4 of
Decree 4.
Decree 4 of 1984.
Decree 4.
There was also Decree 2.
So we're back to those days.
State Security Decree number 2.
How important is it that civil society, all of us, media, the religious circle, those in
businesses, everybody,
take active, interest when these bills are taken to the National Assembly?
Yes, let me just reveal that I have been a victim of these two decrees or laws. I was arrested in 2019 and first detained for 45 days under the Anti-Terrorism Act. And then recently, of course, the reason I came back to Nigeria is because I'm facing a cybercrime, charge instituted by the Nigerian police force on behalf of Daniel Ojukwu, who is a senator.
It's even strange to hear that you are being charged with cybercrime. I mean, I wonder if you're a Yahoo boy.
That's what brought me back to Nigeria after I left about a month and a half. I was in court a week ago. But here is what is interesting. It is that when these things happen to certain people, we don't pay attention to them, until it gets to everybody. I was screaming my heart out that, this Anti-Terrorism Act is going to get to everybody, even before it got to me, when I saw the law. But what is sad is that the Cybercrime Act of 2015 actually had the input and participation of a lot of NGOs and CSOs. And that's why we have to be careful about our CSOs and NGOs and all these people who claim to be NGOs and CSOs who are actually doing it for the sake of money. And they were part of the people who were going to the National Assembly and arguing about this, and forgot or were not interested or did not even look at the law because they have this kind of symbiotic relationship with some NGOs, dangerous ones. And when this happened, we found ourselves the way we are now. So what I'm going to say is that there has to be a national call or protest to completely abrogate the Cybercrime Act of 2015, abrogated. And this is why I keep calling for a new constitution for Nigeria, because you can't amend the 1999 constitution. It's impossible. If you amend one side, they will bring out another thing, the reason they went with the Cybercrime Act and they're using it very effectively was because they were trying to have a social media bill that failed because of pushback and resistance from Nigerians. So they're going to bring more. What this boils down to is how the corrupt people protect their loot and don't want to be reported upon. And this is why I say sometimes, and I disagree sometimes when people say, well, media can be unethical. Yes, maybe that happened. But what is more unethical than stealing money is meant for everybody, the looting that's happening. Let me tell you, the same day we were trying to bail this guy out of police detention and they were giving us runaround, one former official of Buhari was brought to court and he was granted bail. And I think he's home now, Ajisirika. And his crime was huge. He stole a lot of billions of naira.
Well, allegedly.
There's a guy who stole 80 billion naira.
He's
former
charged.
governor. They can't even find him.
Yeah,
but they can track
though.
a journalist and abduct him, but you can't track a former governor. And even when they are surrounded by security agents. So you see the hypocrisy in this policy. And I hope people get where this is going, because it's going to get to everybody soon.
All right, interesting. The Nigerian Guild of Editors in 2022, in the days of Buhari, said, that the attempt by the federal government then to censor the media was worse than that infamous Decree 4 of 1984 during the dark military days. So what do you have to say about the fact that Daniel's arrest came just some moments before the World Press Freedom Day, and that didn't even matter to the authorities?
Well, that was where I started from. I was saying that it was quite striking that as we were looking forward to World Press Freedom Day, suddenly they disappeared, and then later on it was discovered that it's been arrested. I'm sure by the time where they're doing World Press Freedom rating by next year, Nigeria is likely to, this will affect the rating, of Nigeria when it comes to, press freedom index. And those are the kind of things that I do not think any government should really, want to be seen as a pariah state where, journalists cannot, do their work.
But those in power now, already that mentioned, were those who were part of the pro-democracy struggle.
Well, you see, it's like when somebody who is a journalist is appointed into a position in government, and journalists are saying, there's a world of difference when you are in government. I used to say that when you're out of government, you are there struggling to get information. But when you are there, you want information that is favorable to your principal to go out, or you withhold information. So it's always a struggle. But it's also about the environment, the general attitude really. Because if you have a government that is committed to the kind of things we are saying, then it will reflect in the conduct they are doing. Right. But that point is also a very strong one to say that, look, we have a number of people there. This should also come as embarrassment to them. Right. And they should also, using their own maybe internal means or whatever, be part of talking about these things to say that, it has to stop because things can be done differently.
All right. Before I want to take your final thoughts, I'll start with Sowore and I'll come to you. But the Nigerian Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, whilst giving a speech to mark World Press Freedom Day, said that no journalist, this was after Olatunji and Ojukwu's arrest, no journalist has been incarcerated under the Bola Tinubu administration for practicing responsible journalism. So I just want to put that out there. Mr. Minister, what is responsible journalism in your books? But how can we get ourselves out of this quagmire? Let's start with you, Omoleye. Very briefly, please.
Well, what did we do yesterday when we spent almost 3 days for this, trying to get these guys out? And nothing was done. We went and protested at the headquarters of the Nigerian police. And the next day, he's out. Because these guys don't understand anything that doesn't include some form of resistance. And I think, like I said yesterday at the police headquarters where we protested, that, this clampdown, the media and non-media persons using the Cybercrime Act to oppress people, it's going to lead us to another answer very soon because people value their freedom of speech in Nigeria a lot. And very soon they are going to protect their freedom after speech.
All right. Mr. Arogundade, how can Nigerians get themselves out of this?
Well, I've said that citizens should speak out, others should speak out on behalf of the media because the media is there for the society. It's a societal watchdog. We have to have combined approach. Part of it was, that protest yesterday. But we're also looking at, well, hopefully, we've talked about why can't we have a national policy on safety of journalists and press freedom in Nigeria?
But the Constitution guarantees it.
Yeah, the Constitution guarantees it, but we have also seen in other societies that they take a step forward.
Okay.
Because it's like the Constitution is the broad framework, but we are not trying to spell out the details because we can't run away at some point to really talk about these things at the round table. Why are these things happening? In other places we've had it. And it's part of recommendations of bodies like United Nations to say that when they talk about 3 Ps, they say for journalists there has to be prevention. That is, this kind of things that are happening should be prevented. Then there should be protection. Now, when you talk of protection, it has to come from the state institutions. And then they talk about prosecution. That is where people have been identified to be responsible, steps must be taken. So it's a conversation we'll continue to have. And to the best of our own ability, we'll continue to point out the dangers that this kind of trend represents in a democracy.
All right. Well, gentlemen, maybe we can say safely, hopefully, that if the cybercrime levy or cybersecurity levy, becomes a reality, Nigerians will be paying for the arrest of people like David Ojukwu. Thank you very much, Lanre Arogundade, Director of the International Press Center. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Omoleye, who joined us via video link from Ondo State, Akure. Thank you also as well.